Somewhere around year 3 of my marriage, I think we sat down with a financial advisor to talk about our financial plan, our financial future. We were both a few years into our first careers out of university, and it seemed time to join the world of adults and dig into these RRSP things. One of the first requirements of meeting our financial planner was to both take this financial style test. I'm pretty sure it's called something cooler than that, but I can't recall anymore. The results shouldn't have been surprising. We were always labeled as, air quotes, opposites attract since dating. And sure enough, the key feedback from the test was how completely opposite our risk tolerance was. High risk, no risk. I was high risk. Most likely to lose all our savings on being silent partner in a pyramid scheme. Not surprising that I approached the music business with some reckless abandon. Before I was doing anything substantive, I was dipping my toes into every adjacent opportunity to be around the emerging indie scene, which included finding a way to put on shows, bootstrap concert promoter, battle of the bands, Christian punk rock, CD release parties, and then eventually the real high-risk investment, a record label. I wanted to gamble more on my hunches, on my friends, but nothing tempers your official investment guide diagnosis than 2 babies and a mortgage. Tyson Boyd is a talent buyer, and it needs to always be said, one of the best guys in the business I've ever met. At many levels, the job of booking an artist for a performance is broader than just buying the services rendered. Tyson has been in every trench related to the battle it takes to put on a show. The promoter, the poster designer, the artist liaison, the showrunner, the janitor, the bartender, the merch guy, it goes on. But the most impressive title to carry with longevity? Talent buyer. One of the riskiest roles in the risky business of live music events. The performer has a price guarantee. The buyer can agree to that price, but the buyer needs to know the total of markup plus guarantee to divide by minimum total of tickets needed to be sold to arrive at a ticket price, based on an educated guess on the ticket price ceiling for fans, which also requires the educated guesses on the appetite for this show. It's math. It's just math. But then the math needs a gut check. Will enough people really pay that much? Will I lose my shirt on this show? I used to be a tree planter in the summers to pay for college. Terrible job. The company I worked for, they would bid on a section of land, and I'm talking clear cut on the side of a mountain, ugly, gross. They would bid on this section of land against others. The math would essentially break down to a price per tree. What was the cost of each tree to the company that I was putting in the ground? And that would determine how much I was getting paid per tree. And sometimes you arrived at your total shit plot of land and realize that you're about to lose your shirt. Because, like the music business, one night to the next, you just can't control everything. And sometimes you never know. So, much respect. My name is Glenn Erickson. This is Almost Famous Enough. Thanks for spending your time with us. This is Tyson Boyd. But thanks, Tyson Boyd, for joining me on the podcast. Local guy, Edmonton based. We're both talking out of Edmonton. Tyson, I guess I was thinking about this only 15 minutes ago, and I was like, is he venue owner? Is a concert promoter? You've worn a lot of hats, and you generally have to wear multiple hats, even if they're sort of in the same vertical. But how would you probably introduce yourself if we're walking into a music conference together and introducing ourselves?
So, I try not to confuse the situation, I guess. Depending if I'm representing the Starlight Room, I always introduce myself as one of the owner, operator, and talent buyers of the Starlight Room. And if I'm kind of doing more ConcertWorks focused things, which is our independent concert company, we do a lot of concerts in different cities and venues. And then I'll just say I'm a talent buyer of ConcertWorks. And I find for the most part, I can keep the two separate, though they're very typically the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just people, it depends on the setting that you have. A lot of people have more familiarity than with Starlight Room. Unless I'm down in, conferences in the States, people have more familiarity with ConcertWorks. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, you have the obvious overlap of talent buying sort of being a core role and skill set, obviously to the purpose of what you're doing, but actually running a venue and everything from shoveling the sidewalks if you have to taking out the trash to you get all that kind of stuff that gets to go along with that
Yeah, no,
principle.
absolutely. And I do introduce myself as a plumber, a cleaner, a stagehand, whichever, right? That's just kind of part of running a venue. Is it's
100%.
Just like any small business, you take on all the tasks.
Yeah. Would you say, because we're going to sort of talk a little bit, or at least I want to catch up and get sort of an arc of your, life in this scene, in this industry a bit. So it feels a little retrospective for a few moments. In retrospective, do you feel like Talent Buyer is kind of the main horse you've been riding most of this time? Or I want to get into the different things and phases and stuff that you've gone through from the start to get to where you are now. But I was just wondering if you feel like that, what to you holds up when you look back as kind of what's the main horse you were riding through this whole thing?
I think Talent Buyer is kind of probably the best suited spot. Because that's kind of like once you buy the show, you put it on the market, say, and kind of all directives cascade from there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As far as, once you put it on sale, do the marketing, when the tour is coming around, you're getting production people in line, technicians and everything. So I guess the very core part of where it starts is the talent buying position.
Yeah.
And then it all kind of flows from there.
Okay, well, let's do this. Oh, I should let you know too, full transparency, as far as I'm into my second season now, I haven't gotten terribly topical. Do you know what I mean? It sort of is the overall purpose not to get topical and more so just conversational with somebody about their career. And I definitely plan to keep it that way, but I am going to allow a little more diverging into just specifically, your section of what the music industry is. And I don't know that everybody always understands what's behind the veil. I think there's some interest there. And I think there's a lot of, we'll try to keep the politics out of it, but there's a lot of politics and just current trend discussion on the state of live music and venues and local and all of those things kind of mixed in that same soup, which I know you've done a lot of public speaking on and work hard to advocate for and have some ideas. And I would love to hear those ideas too. And I want to be able to give space for that, which I think is important. So if that's cool. So let me start here though, before I kind of go all the way back to baby Tyson and figure out how we got here. But because if anybody stands by you, you're anything but baby Tyson. Tyson's a man of good stature. Everybody should know. But the term talent buyer, right? I don't even know that sort of the average public fan knows that that's the name of the person who's basically the one who's mostly punching the ticket on if a show is happening or how that whole thing works, right? They may know the term concert promoter. I think that's been tossed around for decades, right? As someone's a concert promoter. But talent buyer has kind of really taken that over in the last 15 years, I feel, as the primary terminology. And people can put on shows at all different levels, obviously, right? I've put on shows in halls and churches and rented out, a space at the U of A back when, was it Dinwiddie Lounge, I think, up there and stuff. And so all over. But I never fancied myself a concert promoter or a talent buyer, but I figured out how to put on a show. And all that to say, it can happen on lots of levels, but the profession itself, how it's recognized, how it sort of fits into the ecosystem of, bands are touring and agents are setting up those tours and all these different people at different places and then you have a specific role. I'm wondering if you could give us that, ceiling view of like, what is the talent buyer actually in this ecosystem of live music, and what your job looks like.
Sure. So touching back on what you said too about concert promoter versus talent buyer, I definitely did notice it kind of distinguished itself maybe about somewhere in between 10 and 15 years ago. And it kind of boiled down mostly to my observation in conferences and such. I found that there's a lot of, you know how concert promoters have a hustle where they have a bunch of people on the ground selling tickets, and then they get like X amount of dollars per ticket that they sell. And, that especially happens in electronic world and hip hop and whatnot. And then sometimes too, when bands are selling their own tickets on behalf of the band, the word promoter got used very loosely at that point. And that's where the talent buyer position kind of became a little bit more distinguished, I guess you could say, when you're kind of at conferences or something, so people would kind of understand a little bit better. And the whole talent buyer position is essentially, you either programming a venue or working on behalf of a concert promoter and buying tours or something. It's basically the negotiation process of, finding your artists and putting the bill together and taking a look at what that ticket price is going to be, and then showing, typically on paper on a spreadsheet, what your expenses are going to be, and then, what the revenue is going to be like for the band. And there's all kinds of deals that you could have. There's other flat deals, but most typically, the deals that you kind of come forward with, even just based locally or with tours, is you come to some sort of agreed upon flat fee, and then it'll be like a bonus structure on top, which is called a split. And once you beat all of your expenses and you match your guarantee, anything on top of that is going to be split. And very typically, it's like an 85% to the artist and 15% additional to the concert company or whatever the talent buyer puts in place there, right? So it's just basically kind of navigating, agreed terms for either when an artist is stopping into your city, your venue, or whichever. And from there, like I said, that's kind of your blueprint. And from there, once you have your offer and your plan and budgeting in place, then it all kind of cascades in a process from when you announce and go on sale all the way to when you produce the show day of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So, so that means, just a quick interjection, like right off the bat, people can probably start doing the math that you're probably juggling a calendar more than anybody around as that kind of in that kind of a role.
100%. And at the Starlight Room, I remember giving you a tour when we were adding the stage in the back, and then downstairs. Now we have 3 stages that we're juggling within that calendar of varying capacities. So it becomes a little bit more of a juggle, and it keeps life interesting, I guess. The advantage of that as well for a place like the Starlight Room is, of course, we have the really big room, but not many people start their careers right on the big stage. They build themselves up towards that. There's a lot of stuff that we're really interested in with programming as well that are pretty niche genres, and there's limited fan bases for them or whatever, and people typically like to keep an environment tight.
Yeah.
So the smaller venues and smaller stages work, and as artists grow and develop, you can move them into the bigger capacities.
Yeah.
And that goes as well outside of Starlight, of course. We're very famous for a lot of artists that kind of start maybe their first show or first couple shows at the Room and then expand into festivals and larger venues.
Yeah, I mean, we can touch on that in a bit, because I was going to ask you and just chat about the history of the Starlight Room, especially since we just moved past this 35th anniversary. You guys had a great set of shows and lineups to celebrate all of that, and kind of look back at 35 years. And 35 years takes you all the way back to like the infamous Nirvana playing, the Bronx, an older version of the same sort of space and venue. So yeah, and then I remember hearing you mention a couple of acts that are more recent that have gone on to play arenas and festivals and have 10 million streams, I think, like you were talking about. Do you remember which couple of those bands you were talking about that wasn't that long ago that you said were hitting now arenas?
Don't remember specifically, but there is a few.
Yeah.
Recently, like just before pandemic, I did a show with this group called Bad Omens, and they were
That's it. I was going to say Omen, but yeah, Bad Omens.
Yeah, Bad Omen, and they're playing festivals. They're the big boys on one of the stage, and bands that have had years of experience are kind of playing beneath them. But they were like the second of a 5-band bill just before pandemic. I'm trying to remember. Spirit World, or Spirit Box. Sorry. They were another one that played March 2019, and they were the first of 4. And I, typically sometimes the first bands of a bill I don't always see, because that's a really good time for me to slip out and eat a quick meal or something.
Yeah.
And come back once you get the doors open. So I actually didn't remember them performing exactly until we were filling out this paperwork during pandemic. And I caught the poster, and I remembered them, of course, but the name just didn't click with me. But they've been playing arenas and such. And then, in the last 10 years, we had the band Ghost. They did a show at the Starlight Room, and they're playing arenas, and it's kind of the natural progression. But around 2019 as well, we had Orville Peck did his first show, and Starlight Half Room, and then a few years later, he just was one of the headliners at Folk Fest here, and so that's kind of a pretty common evolution, and you don't always know. Sometimes, like I feel like I feel like I'll know. And sometimes it's just me being a really big fan, and
I was going to say, more wrong. I was going to wonder if you were going to finish that sentence of I feel like I should know, because it's funny, right? Because this is exactly it, Tyson. You're there all the time, and you can list off these bands that started, there. And the Starlight Room's not a small room. So they obviously all started at even smaller venues before they were booking, 500 people or whatever, you know what I mean, in a Starlight Room.
For sure.
So I think the funny thing, I actually thought about this yesterday for a second, which was, I wonder if people assume that you should have developed the magic skill right now to predict who's going to be a star. You'd have the Back to the Future, you would know what's going to happen, and you should be able to pick that out because you've seen so many. But none of us do. This is the point. None of us ever do, really.
No,
sometimes we have a hunch, but
sometimes for sure. I went down to South by Southwest, I believe it was 2017, and Coulter Wall was playing one of the Sask music events. And he was one of the featured artists. And, when you're going down to those showcases and you're one of the Canadians down to South by Southwest, you follow and support each province showcase, right? And I remember Coulter was playing a really small showcase, and he just really stood out. And I wanted to get him at the Starlight Room, and eventually, when we got back, I think it was 4 to 6 months or something, he had a performance, and I still have this on my Facebook somewhere. If you look back, and I said, I'm like, you must come see this guy. It is very likely the last time that he'll ever play a room of this size. And turned out I was right on that one. He's
there you go.
He's become really popular. So
if only there was some way to turn that into a profit, but there's no gamble on that. There's no Vegas odds on small indie acts busting out, unfortunately. They put odds on everything else. I don't know why they can't put odds on small indie acts busting out. Then
I might derail the conversation a slight touch here right now. Because here's one of the scary parts of our industry right now, and this is more so less on the concert promoter side, but more on the Canadian protecting our artists side. Is there's labels and groups in the States that are using AI to scour the internet to try to get artists that are just starting to break out in streams. And they'll get alerted once, one artist is starting to get a certain amount of streams. So the whole more organic side of, going to shows and seeing or hearing word of mouth about how this artist is really good and they're drawing audiences and whatnot, that's starting to disappear. And now some of these artists are getting scooped out and brought down stateside before we even get a chance to have them in any of the rooms or the venues. Yeah,
so
it's
the algorithm, they're using the algorithm in a new way to basically just detect, and then it's math for them, right? Like the algorithm says this works this high a percentage of time, and they'll take their chances on it then. Yeah, that's interesting. Wow. I mean, that's a real interesting twist again, that's not the AI side that's being talked about, right? Everyone's just talking about AI music and those AI bands or artists, and nobody's talking about other aspects where that human element of curation. I've had this talk with a number of people on the podcast though, right? Is that curation aspect, right? So we're all like fully overwhelmed with the algorithm concept and how your Spotify Wrapped is going to show up, and all of this kind of stuff is already kind of taken over. But yeah, the curation aspect of music, and again, like essentially being a talent buyer, you have to have a very strong sixth sense gut punch feeling of how to curate a lineup, of how to put people together, about what the timing is, about who is the timing right for me to bring in. Like, yeah, you didn't learn this mathematically with a computer algorithm at all. So that's a really big kind of challenging shift, I bet. Is that being talked about all over the place? Like, or is it just starting?
It's just starting. You could kind of see some of maybe some of the signs, I guess, if you're kind of paying attention to what's happening here in Canada, but they're starting to kind of move out some AR positions at major record labels, and some of those, they're trying to consolidate the industry down in the States and which I mean, here in North America, the States is kind of the driving force of our music industry, right? As far as I'm speaking strictly again for the for-profit in my world, I guess, more than anything. So yeah, there's some telltale signs, I guess. I mean, I do believe it's moved past the point of speculation, and I do think that this is kind of coming up at the forefront of conversation. But I mean, like, here's the thing: is our industry here in Canada is so small, and I find like a big problem that we've had with advocacy and whatnot. For our industry, the biggest problem is there's so few people, so we have so few voices. You know what I mean? So like typically, I've been actively trying to find larger kind of parties to kind of join us as a power in numbers type thing. When we were trying to change some AGLE legislation, I was approaching, Alberta Craft Brewers Association, or the cannabis associations and whatnot, because they're the ones who have a very big subscription base, and they have a lot of voices, and they're very organized, and they all do have a mutual interest in supporting live music community and stuff like that. So it's a pretty easy conversation, but then it gets into all kinds of confusion, or bureaucracy, I guess you could say. Whereas, I didn't really fully realize that, like Alberta Craft Brewers Association gets hung up sometimes by, cannabis, because cannabis will be like, well, what about us? And it's the same vice versa with the brewers and whatnot. And then it kind of becomes a little bit of a standstill. And I think that is kind of issue, I guess, with government bureaucracy in general, is you could really get hung up on the what aboutism.
So let me put a little pin back on the talent buyer thing then that we sort of started with that, which is the way you were describing it then, and the role of it. I think it's interesting, as you started by saying, I'm both the Starlight Room, which is a historic venue in Edmonton, and then Concert Works, which is, a broader, promotion company, right? So you're looking at putting together tours and shows, not just locally, and you're not sort of locked to the purposes of a venue. You're locked to the purpose of a promotion, like a tour, whatever version of a promotion cycle it'd be around what that is, and in different places that you've obviously made good connections to get into different venues and all that stuff that you have to do. So I think it's an important thing to note then about what that job and what that role is in people's understanding, is that, there's a distinct difference. I would guess even though that there's an overlap, because then if you're you're running the Starlight Room, you're running a local venue. That's a venue that's also going to be used by talent buyers. So talent buyers have to work with talent buyers, right, to facilitate these shows and these tours that come through. And that's sort of the people I think probably already guessed. That's kind of the web that gets woven in the music scene when it comes to touring, when it comes to beyond just running local shows. And you kind of have to have your ear to the ground on what's good and happening and always coming up, because it's always changing and evolving, the local scene, and that feeds into a lot. But then all this work with knowing who the people coming through are and what their background is. And if you're in a venue that's not totally super niche, and obviously moving towards concert works, not a lot of the specific just promotion companies are niche, right? They're a lot broader. So you have to have a pretty good understanding of a lot of genre and a lot of relevance and regional context and all that kind of stuff too. So there's a lot of layers to know and learn. So I want to dig in for a minute to figure out how you learned that, because this is what's fascinating to me, Tyson, probably at this point in your life and career, is that I know you kind of went to school for this, I'm using air quotes, but most of the industry roles in this industry feel apprenticed and feel learned on the job, all the nuances and layers and all the stuff we're talking about. So I'm kind of curious how you get to there, because I think in every city, and everybody's going to run into a handful of Tysons who have sort of like, they're the ones promoting and talent buying and running venues, and some of them elevate up to larger goals and ambitions, like running a independent company like ConcertWorks. So let's go all the way back to how you got into music, because we joke often that a lot of people in the industry are just people who, being in a band, didn't pan out, and then they move off into some other aspect or role. And I don't know if that's the case for you. Like, I've known you for quite a while, and I think you and I go back to probably when you started, I don't know if it was volunteering or working full or part-time at Alberta Music, the provincial association. And I know that you came out of, I think, the arts management program at McEwen to that. So I don't even remember what year that would be. That's how far back you and I go. I know that anybody who would know you and meet you know that you have stayed so true to yourself. You clearly look like a guy who still listens to metal, always listened to metal. And you distinctly wear it on your sleeve, which is awesome, but you aren't locked in that niche of how you do your job. So I wondered, was Tyson like a metalhead growing up, and then he wanted to be in a metal band, and then that progressed, and then at some point you started to see a career path. So take me all the way back to baby Tyson, still wearing the long jean shorts and the heavy metal shirts and the ponytail, and tell me where it all started.
Okay. When I first met you, that was around 2009, and I was on a field placement from Arts and Cultural Management, and trying to pursue a career at that time within music. When I first became a fan of music was a very long time ago. And I mean, I started listening to, my dad was playing CCR, stuff like that. Like, back then, I could say that CCR sounded really heavy to me. That was before I discovered heavy music. I just liked, the raspiness of John Fogerty. And it felt aggressive, right? Yeah. And so that really appealed to me. And I was like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there. And, this was before internet. This was before, I grew up on a cattle ranch in northern Alberta. So, we had 2 channels, and we did
country and western.
Country and western, yeah, AM radio. And, it was actually really hard to become a music fan for, the first number of years. I think it was like, I was about 6 or 7 or something. We got a satellite, and that's when we first got Much Music, and I discovered a channel on Much Music called Loud. Yep. And that's when they started playing heavy metal videos, and I would record them and, go over to my friend's house and we'd watch them, religiously every week. And then Beavis and Butthead came out. This is kind of a funny story because a lot of people my age will talk about how influential Beavis and Butthead was. And like, you got to remember, this was again pre-internet, where you had a short half hour and they're just watching clips of videos, and they would have the artist, and you'd write down the name of the artist, and I taped all of those ones too. And you could be watching a third of a song and become completely obsessed. And once I wrote down these names, I personally had to go to the local Radio Shack, and they had a giant binder that you'd flip between the pages, and most often that's how you ordered your music, and it would take about 5 to 6 weeks to get one album. So between me and my friends, we would very carefully like pick out which albums they would order, and then I would, and then we'd tape them and trade them, and read the liner notes from there. And the first couple of thank yous, you just had to assume that those were probably really good bands too. So you'd get into that just literally by the thank yous. And
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. And honestly, it worked. It really worked. Some of my favorite artists that I still listen to this day were from that. But I tell this story time and again, so people have heard it. But the first time that I ever saw the Disciples of Power was on Much Music, and it was the song Crisis. And, I was blown away. I was stopped in my tracks, and I watched the whole video, and then, wrote it down, and I went to the Radio Shack as one would do, and went to go order Disciples of Power, and it wasn't in the binder. Right. And so that was, I didn't know. I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting.
Yeah.
At the time, it was way different than Metallica or anything that I was listening to. And so, my family went to Grand Prairie one time, that's the big city at the time, and went to the record shop, and I couldn't find it there. So that was odd. And then, it took about 8 or 9 months, maybe even 10, I can't even remember. But we went to go visit my grandparents in Edmonton. And that was, I used to like to hit the pawn shops and record shops, and I found Disciples of Power at one of the record shops, and that's when I was reading the liner notes to figure out where they're from, and whatever. And once I found out they're from Edmonton, that just like literally changed my world.
So let's just pause for 1 second just to make sure everybody captures this picture, because first of all, what you're describing sounds like 1978, like process. You know what I mean? Like original Columbia House recording stuff where you're ordering your music from somewhere. But you're not that old, so it's not that long ago. It's just a decentralized, like you're not in a major urban center experience, because Radio Shack doesn't even exist anymore. And you kind of zoomed past it, but I was just thinking, what kind of, like, think about the waiting and the anticipation and the searching, and then finally finding, you know what I mean? That long to finally find this record that you probably weren't sure if you'd ever be able to find and get your hands on. And for music fans who know how exciting it is to get new music when they love it, I'm just like, that's quite a process you just described. It's unreal.
Honestly, I kind of miss it. Like,
yeah,
I just don't know if I'll ever intently listen to a record as much as I did back then.
Yeah.
Just waiting, the anticipation to get it, and just the whole ritual behind it. Like
that's exactly magical. The word. Yeah. I'm a little older than you, Tyson, but, and I grew up kind of in like church circles, and it was being highly pushed to listen to like Christian rock. And the irony is that like the late 80s, early 90s, Christian rock had a ridiculously thriving alternative indie scene. It was very fun and cool, and very small, right? And you couldn't get a hold of that stuff. And then one record label came along called Tooth and Nail that was putting out everything that was awesome. I think the biggest one was the punk band MXPX, which kind of crossed over. Yeah. But I had to mail order all that shit. Like you know what I mean? I had to, when I finally tore a thing off the back of one of the liner notes of one of those, CDs or whatever, to find a way to like mail order all that stuff. And that's the 90s. It's not that long ago that you think the world changed, where we had so many barriers to entry to, but now we look back and we're like, that experience was so much richer for showing so much intent, right?
Absolutely.
Like, no wonder we become such huge fans, because we had to put in so much work to get to it. Sorry, I derailed with your telling your story.
No, absolutely. And like, I remember, so like between me and my friends, it seemed like sometimes we were maybe a little bit bigger of a fan of one band versus the other, because that was like the one band we discovered, you know what I mean? And like, but yeah, it was quite a process. I quite miss it. I find, maybe I won't skip ahead to present. I'll just keep working on my direction towards there. But so yeah, like I said, discovering Disciples of Power, right around that same time I started playing guitar, and I was playing actually in the school band, and I managed to get my teacher to allow me to play guitar while everyone was playing, brass instruments and whatnot.
Yeah.
And there was one other fellow who played a bass then, and he had an SNFU sticker on his bass. And again, I'd never heard of that band either, but I recognized SNFU because of James Hetfield from Metallica wearing an SNFU shirt in the Garage Days Revisited album. And so that was another big moment where, everything started becoming a lot closer towards, like realizing, because I mean, like, when I first started watching some of these videos and everything, it was, light years away. Everything was down in areas that I probably would never see in my lifetime, is what I was thinking, you know what I mean? Nothing was close, and like I was surrounded by farming and whatnot. That was, I'd never seen anyone play an instrument before, whatever. And right around that same time, I'd come across the Smalls. And that was one of the first bands that I got to see live and understand that, bands did tour and like they did exist within your realm. And, they were a very identifiable band as well, because at the time, Doug used to wear the John Deere hat and flannel and such. And that was something that, very felt distinctly Albertan to me as well. But
by realm, you mean your own backyard.
Yes.
Right. You're talking about bands and the discovery that these bands actually come out of my area. Like, they're actually around me. That's very revolutionary for people.
No, big time. Yeah. And like, that's when you start to realize, that there is an identity that we have within the province and towns and whichever. So that was a really kind of, big mark for me, I guess, moving kind of ahead as a fan. There was other experiences, and I don't want to get too wordy here, but, I had a friend that used to come and stay with his grandmother, which was 1/4 section over from our farm. And he would come every summer, but he was from Ottawa. And we became friends over the years, and every summer we'd spend a lot of time together. And one summer he came back with some music, and he had a guitar, and that's how I first kind of started learning how to play. But I went to Ottawa one time to stay with him and his family, and he had started a band at the time, and I think I was probably 13 or 14, and they were dubbing cassette tapes, their first demo. And so we started recording cassette tapes, and we were like photocopying the cover, cutting them out, folding it up, and going and selling these tapes for $5 a piece, and like riding our bikes and selling them to everywhere. And that was like a very big moment too, of when I first like started finding out about the DIY scene. And at the time as well, this was really fascinating now. And I just ran into him here recently in Kelowna at the Canadian Country Music Awards, but Tom Green was on public access television in Ottawa. And he used to have skateboarding, and he had the local bands on the show, and like we would watch that. And again, I started recording that and I took it back to Alberta, and me and my friends were start watching that. But that was another big landmark for me, seeing local bands performing, and then also getting to experience my friend's local band who's dubbing tapes and watching them practice, and then going on bikes and selling tapes and whatnot. So I guess those are the very formative years of me getting into music, then understanding like how a local scene could work and whatnot. But still, I did not really think that I had any sort of a place in there aside from appreciating it and like supporting in any way possible that I could. So I finished school, and I went as one does, I guess, to the oil field. And I worked the oil field for a number of years, and my free time, was going and traveling and catching festivals and, spending my money doing the things I wanted to do, which was festivals, live music, and whatever. I also, when I first moved to Edmonton, I didn't spend a whole lot of time here, but it was early 2000. And I lived in a band house with friends who are still a band to this day. And, I started watching, some of the venues and the halls and shows that they were doing, and started getting to know the local scene. And I wasn't really, I got frustrated with playing guitar because I swear I'm tone deaf or something. So I always wanted a way to contribute and support the scene in some way that I could. So I started drawing posters and photocopying posters, and then going and hanging posters up. And, that was for me supporting my friends and supporting, the projects that they were doing. And that is quite simply probably my very first introduction into promoting shows, was doing the posters. And from there, I continued to work. I actually had it quite good in the oil field for a while, where I was having trouble getting out of there because the money was really good.
Yeah.
I in the summer times, I was, working as a carpenter and whatnot. And I was living at Calgary at the time. And this was maybe late 2006, early 2007. It got so congested there that I wanted to get out, and I just decided to pack up my stuff, and I was going to go live out of my truck for a while and go work these jobs and whatever. And I was on my way to Whistler to move a pipeline for they were just redeveloping a highway for the Olympics at the time, and it was around Whistler. And I stayed in Edmonton for a little bit, and I got a job with a friend where I was framing houses. And I had a really bad fall one morning. I hit some ice and fell about, from one floor to a sub-basement. And I ended up blowing out a few discs in my vertebrae, unfortunately. And that was a little bit of a career-ending injury at the time. It took about 9 months or so for me to kind of work through that. And at the time, it was really unfortunate because I ended up working in a liquor store, and it was a big eye opener for me because I, had a really good job, and I was kind of working all over the place and making really good money. And then all of a sudden I was working at a liquor store, and I wasn't able to lift more than 10 pounds or whatever. And it was just all completely new to me. And I have to admit, I was very depressed. And that's when I started looking into, what I could do, outside of that. And I found a program, which was arts and cultural management at Grant MacEwan. Yeah. And that was something I didn't even know that it existed. At that point in time, I did know a couple of friends that were working for promoters. And, I started realizing that this is something that you could pursue. And I know it kind of sounds silly, but I just didn't know. Everything to me just seemed like it was down in Hollywood or, elsewhere.
100%.
I never really thought. So that kind of clicked in with me, and I decided that I was going to pursue that. And I decided to start working at venues at the time because that's really what all I did was work and then go spend time in venues. So I may as well work at a venue when I'm too broke to afford to go there on my own dime. I may as well work there and catch the shows and whatever. So I was working in venues in the evening, Pawn Shop, New City, Filthies, some of those. And then doing school in the daytime. And then, I took the shorter end at the time of the program, but I did it over the course of 2 years. And that's when I started working at Alberta Music, and then with Brett Fraser at Reconcile for my field placement. Now, you were saying you don't learn everything kind of within the classroom within this industry. And that's kind of what I found at the time. I had discovered, because I was working for a not-for-profit arts association, but I was in the nighttime, I was promoting shows, and I definitely understood there was a correlation of the two. But what for a little while, I was kind of keeping a balance of doing a 9-to-5 daytime thing, and then the evening working, promoting shows and working in the venues. Mm-hmm. But I always kind of gravitated towards the venues and the underground. and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I wanted to kind of pursue. And I think that that's eventually, I started getting more involved with the pawn shop at the time. And that's when I first started a concert company of my own. And, I was fortunate enough to get a couple of people that gave me some responsibility with tours that they were booking through here. And there were bands on major labels. There were bands that I was really into. And I took that really, really seriously at the time. And I also got hired as a production rep for Live Nation at the time. So I was getting some training from some very notable people, within the industry that I have such a huge super respect for. And I started learning the more formal process, I guess, of how they would expect shows to be done. And then I started applying that to the shows that I was doing, which was very much overkill. But I was trying to practice everything that I was kind of learning on, a very professional setting and applying it to these more underground shows. And from there, that just kind of really helped me evolve, I guess, learning the business end and the process and whichever, and applying it to something. Because music ultimately is a labor of love, and it's a passion, and it's hard to put it into the formalities of business. You know what I mean? Without taking the heart out of it. It's a fine balance.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's also very important to be able to balance your books and not go out of budget. And for a lot of people that I work with within the scene, they are very much, the folks that worked in underground music, hardcore metal, punk and whatnot, I find became very strong when they kind of grow and develop and start working in other parts, working in other genres and other parts of the industry and whatnot. And I think that's quite simply because there wasn't a lot of money to go around. So you have to become very good at working with money and watching all the dollars and cents and whatnot, because,
how to be successful with no margin. Yeah,
exactly. So I started learning that was actually a pretty good strength. And so that takes us to about 15 years ago. And I came across the partners that I have now with ConcertWorks. And at the time, they were part of Foundation Concerts, which was also Brent Oliver and Steve Durpak.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when Foundation folded, Brent had moved to Winnipeg at the time. Stephen moved along, and my partners were still at the Starlight Room. And they were working on some shows at the pawn shop, and I could see that they were struggling a little bit. And I offered to help kind of push these shows a little bit better. And we just started kind of working from there. And they decided to kind of basically, I guess, dissolve Foundation at the time. And we put together a new brand, and we kind of put that together, which is ConcertWorks. And so 15 years later, that's what we're still working under. At the time, I was really based out of the pawn shop. They were kind of working at the Starlight Room as well, doing shows. But now, obviously, Starlight's kind of our full-time home base, but we do programming throughout many different venues throughout the province in Western Canada.
Yeah. Well, that's really amazing. That's quite a journey to sort of like figuring a thing out. And I guess the cool part that I keep hearing in there without you saying it is like you sort of like leaned into this idea, this thing you loved, and thought I might as well start with doing the part that I loved. You loved going to shows. You were in the venues so much. You started to figure out how it worked. You started to see the wizard behind the veil, and then you started to get in there and do what the wizard does. But I guess the part that's cool in there that I'm hearing, Tyson, is that like it also is it's a part of the industry and a scene that kind of welcomes you in, right? It looks, like if you want to pursue, I guess what I'm hearing is like, if you want to pursue a thing that you love in an area, and like you said, the way you treated, even your small hardcore shows with the professionalism that you were learning from these other shows and these opportunities you were given, that it's like there's open doors, like there's availability for you to kind of step in, which is pretty awesome. I know that like you're talking about the pawn shop. There's a lot of like great venues, and I think everybody wherever they are right now listening, in their cities, like probably know hopefully where the cool venues are, and also maybe know what the history of some of the venues were, right? Because even in Canada, being like you said, a small industry, when the live music scene was more, I don't want to say just thriving because that comes and goes in every era, but it was maybe a little more foundational, right? The touring scene was a little more foundation to the economy of music in Canada. There were iconic, long-standing venues in every city. Edmonton was lucky to have two iconic ones, right? In the Starlight Room, then Rev and Bronx before that, in what is now a deemed historical building in our city, and the classic Sidetrack Cafe, which was so well known and has such a reputation. And I've talked about this on the podcast. Like they're across the country. They were from Vancouver's Railway Club and such, right across to, the Dakota Tavern and a whole bunch of these ones in Toronto, and the Horseshoe, which is still out there, and El Macambo, and anyhow, you can move along. But the pawn shop, there were some that were just like, they had awesome runs, I guess is the best way to put it, right? And I'm not going to spend a bunch of time. It would be easy with the guy who's grown up and had his hands in a lot of these venues to just kind of wax poetic and mourn the glory days. So we won't do that. But I will say, like, the pawn shop was really well run. It kind of had, that kind of chance. And it was in a space that had been a couple of things right on White Ave, which of course has always been a iconic street for Edmonton and for people who visit Edmonton. And so that kind of had a lot of history there. That is a touch point for you and I, actually, that I'm saying pawn shop. The Wheat Pool's farewell was, we chose the pawn shop for our venue, and you treated us like gold. I've always remembered it. I never had a reason not to like you or not respect you before that, ever. I had no reason. I'm not saying this that way. But probably that moment in time, Tyson, is like when I gained like a real professional and personal respect for you. We were never an entitled band. I'm proud of that. We didn't ever ask for much, but you really kind of rolled it out for us and treated that moment with a lot of respect, that we were trying to have a real strong bookend for our fans. And that was a pretty amazing time. And that was at the pawn shop. So that was 2012. And you were a big part of that, which I always really appreciate. So here's what I'm maybe hoping we can talk to, since you kind of landed at this is where my career kind of has now blurred into the last 15 years, that this is kind of where the most bulk of my work in my career has been I've said this a lot. I think people have asked me before, like, I think people assume that because the artist is being a very loud voice right now about revenue streams and the challenges of digital and the Spotify and those platforms and music rights and rightly so. So that kind of gets the loudest voice. But I've always said, of all of the hats I probably wouldn't professionally wear in the music scene, it's the concert promoter, the talent buyer, because you guys are running risk on every single show. But like, very few shows do you probably put on in the grand scheme of things that you feel like, well, this one's a guarantee. This one's in the bag. We're going to do well on this one. And you kind of have to have those, because you know how many you're not going to do well on. And I don't know if everybody understands that, right? Is that your job essentially is you're feeding and building a music industry by putting on shows that you're going to know that you lose money on. You're going to put local bands on bills that you know are not going to bring enough of their friends out to fill out that little 20% that you would really like them to kind of put the show up to margin, but you do it anyhow, you know what I mean? Or you maybe have a good sense, or you have a good relationship with the other promoter or agent who wants you to put this band on the bill or put them on, on a Wednesday night because they need to fill a spot on their tour, you're not going to make money. And you have to work hard to have the shows that make money to cover those losses and keep the cycle going. And you contribute to the scene so much. I think it's the hardest, riskiest job in it all. So I'm wondering if you can just tell me, because you know it obviously so well, I wonder if you can just tell me how that very fact has evolved in this 15 years that you've kind of been like hips deep in doing this, like in a lot of different levels.
Well, it is calculated gambling, essentially, as you mentioned. There's a lot of risk. I'm not going to lie. I personally don't know if I would be able to sleep at night if I was doing this profession under somebody else. You know what I mean? If I was responsible for a company and the financial success, that would really stress me out. It really works well for me that, I'm only answering to my own self and, my partners, who we all have kind of the same, thought of the matter. Because there's a lot of things that I do that don't make sense. But I mean, it kind of comes with part of why I love music and the business and whatever. Yeah. And then, there's a number of shows that we do with this younger scene, and it's like, when you're getting 80% of the audience and their kids, you're not making money off of them. But I mean, it's for me, it's building a future generation. It's part of building the scene. It's part of passing it on, and it's paying, it's me remembering when I was a kid and getting excited about music and everything that I was influenced in. That's got a big amount of value to me too. But I mean, financially, that's not something that makes sense. But I think that it is a big part of the contribution. And I mean, maybe getting these kids into music today pays off in the future. Maybe it doesn't, or whichever, but I still find it exciting. And I mean, that's kind of, I guess, the alternative. But I mean,
it's a passion and a business, right? You already described that. It's both a passion project, because we all know that if you aren't passionate about it, you'll burn out on it and you're not going to make enough to keep you going and happy or sustain things. But you can't do it at zero, so it becomes a business. And you're always weighing those scales against each other, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's the Cadbury secret as of right now. I mean, for years and years and years, our whole for-profit industry, say, has been reliant on alcohol sales. And I mean, for a number of years, it's worked up until, more recently, it just isn't. And it's become an interesting conversation, I guess, because many people will argue, how do you determine artistic merit on, alcohol consumption? And I say, well, that's the tools that that's what we're given here right now. So I don't necessarily agree with it. I'm always trying to figure out the ways that we move past it. But like you said, we can't start taking money off of the tickets, because that's how we pay the artists. The venue and touring infrastructure, it's all symbiotic with touring artists, right? So
can you unpack this for us a little bit? Like when you say that like the alcohol sales part isn't what it used to be, and the real quick picture to paint is like whether you're walking into your local Celtic pub, like we have O'Byrne's on White, for example, that's been here for a long time, and I cut my teeth playing in there, and they would have anything from open stages to bands on some nights. And yeah, like the amount of bars I went in, I played that, there was no guarantee when I was up and coming, and they were paying me out of the cash in the till from drink sales. And, and so like so many venues besides, because there's the version of a venue that's like the concert venue, right? Like that's what it's known as. But then there's so many venues, which are bars. And I think everybody recognizes that that's sort of been the history of all this stuff. And then, but it's the same even all the way up to booking, all the way up to the arena and all that, like, the amount that they expect to take in on the sales of drink and concessions and just people being present and what they do while they watch music. And so I'm just wondering, when you say that it's not the same, I'm like, what shifted? Was it like, is this government legislation as to how that factors in? Is it literally social and societal changes about consumption and what happens? at venues? What shifted?
Well, there's a number of things actually. Part of it is kind of government and, what was it? 2016. I don't know if you remember, we lost a lot of venues in Calgary that year. And I believe Edmonton, it was about somewhere between 2014, 2015. And a lot of it was, there was a little bit of a shift. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud here at the time frame.
It's all good. It's all good.
2014, I think it was, for a long time, our dollar was pretty on par with the US. Mm-hmm. And in 2014, that took a shift. And a lot of our bands and tours and everything are paid on US currency, right? And at the time as well, we also had, I think, 2 increases, maybe 3 it was. It's hard. Taxes on alcohol. As well, at the same very time, minimum wage went up at the same time. And that just became a big challenge with all 3 things happening at once. Yeah. And within a very short time, we lost a lot of businesses. Now, that we always kind of adapt from those times. But I mean, sometimes it's really hard to steer a ship, when often you're planning 8 to 10 months, even a year in advance or something. A lot of plans are already in place, so it's hard to adapt quick. But you always kind of adapt. But through the years, when you kind of start getting back on your feet and you're making this balance and, starting to make some decisions, like, again, we 2017, we decided to take over the Starlight Room. We started changing the room to make it work as far as having the 3 stages, and we could scale it and kind of make it work where we could do multiple programming in order to kind of adapt and kind of keep busy and have that revenue coming in and whichever. But then we had a hard stop with pandemic. And from that time, obviously, there's a whole lot of mounting debts and everything. But I mean, people's habits did change. Social settings have changed. A lot of people have kind of moved a little bit more online, maybe become a little bit more introverted. Just technology in general has shifted socializing. Consumption in general, people, are, for varying reasons, are just consuming less alcohol, which I don't think is a problem whatsoever, except when your industry, which happens to be the arts, is dependent on it. Then it becomes a little bit of an eye raiser. Yeah. It's just kind of trying to shift and move around that boat. Like when you're so deeply rooted in it, it's kind of, the question, like, I mean, it's the question on everybody's mind, I guess, right now is how do we move past this? And I mean, we've as we continue to lose venues, we continue to lose the most valuable resource, which is the human resource. And it's just, our voices become less and less. And unfortunately, just like every area of industry globally right now, it allows for a lot of these bigger entities to come in and kind of dominate the situation. And then, I mean, we start to lose a lot of the grassroots kind of potential, which is our smaller venues and such.
Yeah, which is, and I get that the people who are, like you said, like you start to get more conglomerates, forming, like in a lot of industry, not just music industry. You see that happen. You see it down even with, I was surprised recently to find out in the States that because everything's so private, like hospital conglomerates, like companies are buying up hospitals and just owning all the hospitals and then being able to dictate healthcare in an entire region. And so it happens in a lot of places and ways. But, while they're the ones getting the lion's share of the profit, then, as we would assume, you just kind of have to feel like, if the river's drying up upstream, you know what I mean? Your waterfall is going to disappear eventually, and you would hope that those would be the people that would be concerned and want to do something about keeping that flow happening. So I don't know whether, in your opinion, there are people playing it from, in the big boys game, so to speak, the large companies, like whether they're trying to actively work on the grassroots and the feeder system, I guess, of how we develop, the future talent and the future performers and artists that people want to pay money to see and interact with. Do you feel like they're a part of the conversation and part of the effort and solution and advocacy, or do you feel like there's a disconnect?
That's a tough question for me because I am an optimist and I'm constantly proven wrong. So, but I
don't mind an optimistic answer. It's completely allowed, Tyson. Believe it or not, in our world today, you can actually give me an optimistic, positive answer. I don't mind.
Well, I just refuse to believe that, we may be taking some licks right now, but at the end of the day, people are going to look and see where the source of, the talent is coming from. And, there's a lot of people, in these bigger conglomerates, they're all in major centers that are not sitting anywhere in the prairies like we are here. It seems to me like it's just the most reasonable assessment is to look at that and say like, oh, well, we do need these smaller entities to kind of develop some of these talents in order to feed the machine, right? Like it's again, a lot of the bigger conglomerates already have a lot of the data in front of them to where they can make really good decisions in order to pick like these artists to fill these larger rooms. Why would they want to take a chance on all the all the artists that we are, where we're rolling the dice quite often with a lot of folks that were kind of programming and whatnot, and like I just don't understand why a large entity would want to start getting into talent development when it's just there's no money to be made, right? And like these companies are made for making money. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I would think that the only thread that you can connect those two with is the same way that record labels were always built for probably the first 30 years of their existence on who had the best A&R, right? Because it only makes sense if they have their claws in the people they're developing. I'm using not a negative metaphor by that, but I always remember thinking when I finally figured out how all this works, I'm like, oh, so they just made $10 million off Justin Timberlake, and they're spending 9 of it trying to find the next Justin Timberlake, right? That's what they were doing by going and trying to find all this kid Disney talent and bring them and put them on these little circuits and tours. And I realized like this is how the machine works, right? They need to make all that money and then they need to spend it all trying to find another one because that's how they understand keep the success and the stuff rolling. So it only to me works but that worked in A&R and talent development. You're right. It doesn't really work in talent buying and concert promotion and stuff. Like they aren't able to get their hooks into that on an artist the same way. I mean, until the famous 360 deal came along and companies were trying to be a part of everything on every level. But yeah, I mean, those are really good points. About where we're at with this. I mean, I've often, your optimism is great, by the way. My optimism in it, because I tend to be an optimist as well, has been that when you look back in history, everywhere that there seems like there's scarcity and famine, we tend to breed the best artists and the best rock and roll comes out of places. And then the industry clamors to run over and try to claim it and own it, right? Because they always peak and then they sort of live on a veneer of whatever they're in for a while, and then they have to, deep down they're running and looking for the next big thing. And it always happens in a place that they sort of abandoned. I feel like, whether the scene that comes out of Montreal or the scene that came out of Seattle and the scene that came out of like Liverpool or that came out of Dublin, or history just kind of tells us that it's going to cycle its way around anyhow. So we just have to do everything we can to be the next scene that blows up out of scarcity, maybe. But talking about this, and talking about the cycles. I mean, I grew up in the '80s when, like the way you described, everything you saw on the TV and stuff, right, was like far away and it was like not close and it was huge. And the gap between thinking that me in Western Canada to go from learning my guitar that I had to jump straight to being ready for Much Music or MTV was way too big of a gap to consider, but that's all it looked like. And then all the concerts were all like arenas, right? Like there wasn't a lot of like in my exposure, like all the middle, the professional middle class of music. And And then in the 90s kind of diffused all of that, and the grunge and the electronic scenes and all that kind of stuff became so DIY. And then all of a sudden all the attention and focus came back to this like middle class of music that thrived. And then I feel like right now we're back to concerts, all like the arena, the $350 ticket for somebody who has one hit is baffling to me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm now the person of the old guy who's like, I can't compute that. And my daughter has no problem, right, going and paying for this ticket. And I have, like, somebody has to really sell me hard to spend $50 on a show ticket. And I love this stuff. Like, I've spent my whole life in it. But so that sort of cycle and that plays into what we were talking about, I guess, in my mind, is why I bring that up is like we're in this cycle where, these conglomerates who, they can put up the check for all of these bands to go on an arena tour. And that's where consumers seem to be fine with spending their money. And it makes it hard to answer the question, how do we build grassroots if the consumer seems fine with doing that, right? So how do you convince the consumer this is a good idea? You should come out to the local show. You're going to see a band, and I've heard people try to literally pitch this. You're going to see a band that's going to be famous in 5 years. Well, I don't think anybody believes us when we say that. They just want to know why they should, come to this show. Do you feel like you're in that battle? Is that a regular sort of battle these days, or is it not the thing?
Yeah, no, it's a regular thing. I mean, I do see that all the time. People that are comparing, the cost of a ticket at the arena when they could go see 10 to 15 shows or something that are locally based and whatever. I fall in that category mainly because I like more underground stuff, and I do like the intimacy of shows. It takes, it's got to be a big production or a huge artist that I really want to see to go to an arena or a stadium. I just don't like the environment as much. If something feels like very far away, I kind of lose interest. I like the upfront and right in your face type of experience, right? And I am seeing like a lot of younger kids that I've been working with, anyways. There's a little bit of resistance, I guess, to being on social media or using cameras and whatnot. We have a group of kids that are between 16 and 18 that are more interested in hand-drawn posters and doing it like how we did in the 90s.
Yeah.
And,
cool.
They're making cassettes and, in between shows, they're, I've even seen kids playing hacky sack out front and whatnot, right? Like it's different. And that almost seems to be kind of the new resistance, I guess, is getting back to kind of the analog basics, I guess, not being so tied into social media and not just getting your selfie moment, but being part of an experience, part of a community. And like that part is, that to me is hopefully is never going to go away. And I'm hoping that this kind of just continues to expand. Because right now I watch week after week. When we started, we just got our Class B theater license through pandemic. And that's when we've been able to do more all ages shows. And, I remember the first time when we only had a couple of kids show up and then a few more kids. And now we have like full rooms of kids, and it becomes like, you could just see the new ones that come through, and you could tell it feels like this secret that they just discovered. And like, that's kind of the magic of why, I think that we all kind of get into the local scenes and whatnot, right?
Oh man, 100%. That is the magic, man. Like that's gotta feel really good.
For sure.
Like
for sure.
To see and to feel and experience all of that. Like that's awesome. So I recently got to kind of have that experience, especially because it was out of my pocket, which is, I worked with Jessica Lemon on her Music Day in Canada motion. And so I hosted the event in Edmonton here at Black Bar, and I had never been to Black Bar, and so there's not a stage at Black Bar. They set up on a floor. And so it's like 4 metal bands, and they're all setting up and that whole rigmarole. And then I just realized like they're just pushing tables back, and we were starting early at 7:30, and I'm like, who's coming to a metal show, on a Friday night or a Saturday night or Saturday night at 7:30? And somehow, 7:30, all these like young people flood in the door, and they just go and they stand like just the way you're describing. They just went and stood right in front of it, which is just funny because like it's metal show, so it's like nobody's singing to you. Like they're just gonna scream at you, and you're gonna go. It's just so perfect. It's so rock and roll. It's like I'm gonna go stand 2 feet in front of the guy that's screaming at me, and I'm gonna really feel it. And I could just watch anyhow. So it was a great experience for me. I'm glad that I got put on a metal show like that. It just reminded me. It just reminded me of all of those things that you just described when you're watching these kids, which is like they want to feel it, right? Like, why would you abandon the social media aspect and not include it in your process of how you're experiencing and doing this? Is because that's void of real tactile interaction and feeling and feeling like I made something and I did this and somebody else participated and someone else felt what I was feeling. And that's what inspires me to do this. Yeah, I got to experience that. So I'll use that as a plug, because I know you know, Jessica, that maybe the Starlight Room needs to be in 2026's Music Day in Canada, or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Well, I mean, I've taken up a bunch of your time tonight, but I do want to have one last quick sort of conversation about kind of your role in music, because I don't want to ask the typical question of like, what's wrong with the live music thing? And it just feels like it's keep dying. We've kind of touched on that in different ways already, but I love that you just talked again about the inspiration of seeing young people and how that feeds your optimism in that way too. And you've had a career, as it just turned out, like I think is maybe, if I'm interpreting how you described it, like you never saw this coming when you were, working rigs or construction jobs and moving around and stuff, that this would have been your career and being a part of the whole music scene. Because I talk about the idea of chasing the dream a lot, right? So a lot of people, like I joked at the start, end up in the industry because they were chasing the dream, and then the dream is always the naive, youthful, I'm going to be the rock star, the one in front of all this, the center of it all. And yet they're like this one little piece at the top of an iceberg of what usually makes this whole thing go. So I guess my last question for you, Tyson, is what is the thing about being around live music? What is the thing about it that's going to continue to make a difference in our community, right? Because it's easy to talk to individuals because we all interact with music our own way. It's a little subjective, but you've been involved in community stuff and community concept and building. And I'm just really curious if you can speak to what it is about live music and having venues for them, that actually does something for the community. Like, what have you seen? What are you hoping for?
Like quite simply, I think, just thinking about back to my own experience, again, pre-internet, but leading into today, it's really not that different, is going and finding an artist you love and being able to find the people that love that artist as much as you do. You find your community. That's like probably one of the biggest, most important parts of going and enjoying live music, on top of just being a music fan. And from there, I think that there's just so many different music fans come from all varying walks of life, you know what I mean? So you get all kinds of, interest, sorry, I'm trailing here. But to be able to find certain folks who maybe run businesses down south, whether it be, a retail business or a fanzine or something, and you start kind of, you build your community around the interest of when you first kind of go to a show. And I think that that's a really amazing thing. I think that is what makes like certain cities and scenes really unique. I think that Edmonton really Edmonton's a very blue collar city, but we're kind of expanding and growing, and we're kind of a really affordable place to live right now. So we have a lot of people that are coming into the city, moving here and trying to find that community. And I
Mm.
find a lot of artists and musicians kind of also gravitate towards really cheap, affordable places to live. And together you
That's a
kind
good
of
point.
build,
That's a good point.
yeah, you really kind of start to build like a really unique scene that kind of works in just varying capacities. You know what I mean? Like I'm watching a lot of people move in from Vancouver and Toronto, and you know, we have a bit of a blossoming tech scene and whatnot. And a lot of these folks gravitate towards arts and culture. So you know, like as far as like Starlight Room just celebrating 35 years, it seems like, you know, that's a very big landmark as far as venues go. But we have more people that are just experiencing it for the first time ever, and you know, they're starting to kind of find their people. So it's kind of serving the same purpose that it did from day one. And like,
Yeah.
if anything, you know, as we kind of try to rebuild our whole city and social structure and everything else in kind of weirdly complicated times, it's a really comforting spot to be.
That's a great answer. Like, yeah, I love that the building of the community and be able to, more importantly, the term they use, like finding your community, like, because I think back the minute you say that, I think about even the way you were just describing about the kids, right? And you're starting to see the kids show up, because that's when historically we all sort of relate to that of, and especially people in more niche like music fans, like, you know, so you're growing up and you were into like metal. Yeah, the first time you go to a metal show and all of a sudden you're like, it's not just me. Or you come in from, like you said, the country or the rural areas of Alberta, and now you come to university and then you go to a show. I can imagine what that experience would be like when you felt like I was the only one into, you know, this kind of stuff, you know, when I was here. Like I remember, I joke with people all the time because I was in, you know, Regina, Saskatchewan at the end of the 80s in high school, and everyone was wearing like the Guns N' Roses or Quiet Riot, you know, black shirt with the white half sleeves, long hair, and in the guitar class trying to, you know, play Sweet Child of Mine on a classical guitar. And, and I was like in the closet because I didn't want to get beat up, like listening, you know, to Unforgettable Fire, you know, U2, and finding peripheral bands that I had to go search. Like we talked about it before, I'd find this band called The Alarm and all these other ones. Like, but I had to, you know, when I went to college, I found people who were into that music, and the finding your community has always been so intimately tied to music, right? Which I think is really cool. But I guess what I wanted to say by that is that you're talking about people in their adult stages, people moving here for different reasons, economical changes that happen in communities, and why people would come to Edmonton or why may they come to another city, and or how communities grow in those cities. That, yeah, the music part can be so intimately tied to it. I think about how I'm watching like our folk festivals change, and that has had such a huge community aspect. I mean, generally because, you know, air quotes, folkies have had, you know, stereotypes of being granola and organic and love all this sort of like community garden kind of stuff. That's a real easy cliche to hang on them. But I'm seeing that change, right? I'm seeing the amount of young people at Folk Fest, like even this last year, I couldn't even believe. It was just noticeable to me. But that's a community people really feel comfortable like latching onto and getting into. And when cities provide something as cool as a really big folk fest, it's got a big impact as well. It's bigger than just maybe sometimes the venues as we're talking about them. But yeah, I mean, it's really easy to say to people, you know, get off your couch or get off the phone and go and support it. But I guess in as many different kind and encouraging ways, we have to keep that rhetoric, you know, at the forefront and try to keep encouraging people to do that, especially knowing that it has a bigger impact, I think, in just people finding their place, which is really cool. But yeah. Well, I mean, this has been a really fun conversation, Tyson. Fun for me always. I say this a lot. Selfishly, I get to take people that I know from one level to another, and then kind of dig into a part of their life that maybe I didn't know, and then I get the big picture, and it's fun for me. So I appreciate you giving your time and talking to me about the way you landed in your career, and you're wearing a couple of hats in a career that a lot of people do in every city across the country in North America. And I think it's cool to sort of take a look at what that really looks like. So I appreciate you pulling the veil back a bit. And as always, and I sort of alluded to, you haven't spoiled your sparkling reputation that you earned with me, in 2012 at the pawn shop. And I'll just say, like, there's a lot of people who, there's a lot of people in the part of the business where the money really matters, which is where you sit, that, do a lot of things to spoil reputations for people in this business. Fair. Yeah. And so the fact that you've spent this long just being known as a really nice guy and a really great guy to work with, and I've never heard a single bad word ever uttered about you or the people you work with and the work you're doing, says an awful lot about it. So thanks for everything you've contributed to my community, because we're both Edmonton based, and I think you're pretty awesome, and I appreciate you taking the time with me here, bud.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate you as well.
Yeah, it's cool, bud. Hopefully maybe see you on the floor of the Starlight at a cool show really soon.
Okay, take care.
Okay.
Hey, I'm Alexi. Stick around for post-fame with me and my dad.
I think the quote of the episode needs to be, it's okay not to feel okay. It's okay to feel rage at your own podcast.
Oh, we're just in the corner. It's so far away.
I think they can hear me. I can't sip my tea during this.
You what? No, you shouldn't sip your tea.
Well, I just did.
Well,
I put the microphone away.
Well, then I don't know. We'll see how I deal with it.
Maybe it's ASMR. Maybe some people will like that.
Maybe. Okay. You're going to have to hold your microphone closer because you're feeling sick. But then don't have these big bursts where you all of a sudden talk in your normal bursty voice. Is that
I don't
fair
sound sick.
Yeah, you do a little.
Oh, that's rude.
But,
okay.
Okay,
I'll go extra close and give you my sick.
No, don't do that, because I can't edit it that easily like
okay.
that. Okay, hi, welcome to episode 29.
Of Almost Famous Enough Post-Fame.
Famous Enough Post-Fame. Today is talking a little bit about the episode with Tyson Boyd. So I decided to veer off. I've done this a couple times this season because I didn't want to be topical. But I did have my friend Jen Fritz on, the publicist, and I did ask a lot of questions specific to that role in the industry. Mm-hmm. And today's, this conversation with Tyson was clearly a lot just centered around his work and what it meant. And so it was a little more, specific to that kind of part of his industry and world. So
local legend.
Here's the thing, he's such a nice guy. I don't know, he just seems like always such a great guy. I didn't get to a couple things I wanted to ask him about. I did sort of want to ask him about, because he gave his story and his sort of timeline thing, and he kind of caught up to where I knew him, and he kind of gave his background right up to only 15 years ago, and then basically just made the assumption that I've been doing this for the last 15 years. And I'm like, well, there's a lot inside of that 15 years. Do you know what I mean? So, for example, I touched base with him when he was, just kind of running venues and the pawn shop on White Ave, and where our band had their farewell show when we finished, and it wasn't long after that I think him and his partner, his wife, started that bar that's called Tavern on White now, and did the whole renos and stuff. So I wanted to confirm that with him, and I was going to get to that part because they made a go of that for a while, and then finally sold it and got out of it, and that's a hard business to be in as well. And I think having a career so often, especially one that's as kind of risky as that line of work, he obviously has high risk tolerance, starting a restaurant, high risk tolerance for sure. And you're going to have some, take some big swings, and you're going to have some big failures. And I kind of wanted to sort of ask him, what happened with the bar, and does he consider that sort of a miss instead of a hit, or other things that might have been, things he really went after, whether it be like a big show that he tried to book or things like that. I wanted to kind of cover some of the highs and lows, and we didn't necessarily get to that, but he's so upbeat. That's okay. But I enjoyed his outlook, and obviously it made me sort of rewrite where I thought that even the title and the theme of the episode was going, because I just couldn't get off the way he just answered that one question by saying, well, I'm an optimist. And I was like, man, he just underlined everything about who he is. Like, if I was to stop and instead say, what's the through line of your
It would be
career?
that, yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool how that unfolded itself.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I wrote down one, main note. And it was interesting because it was one of those episodes where, as I was listening, I was just like, oh, this is one of the ones where, I just find, the timeline, very fascinating. In his career is, just very interesting. It's pretty unique, right? There's definitely a very small pool of people like him. And then the one note I wrote down that was, the line that, I guess I, connected with the most was, not about his career at all. And I was like, oh. But it was when you guys were talking, and mistake me if I'm wrong, about, physical media and, CDs and vinyls and
in his early exploration of music and how inaccessible some of those bands were. And
but you guys were talking about it, and you were talking about all of the details, but then he was just you were talking about one thing with digital media, and just he kind of just cut you off, and I wrote it down. He said about having to listen to an album start to finish, and only that album at that time, when you put it in the CD player or the cassette tape, whatever it may be. And he's like, oh, honestly, I kind of miss it. I just don't know if I'll ever intently listen to a record as much as I did back then. And then he was talking about the waiting and the anticipation, and I'm like, we've talked about it briefly before, and just different things with me loving CDs, but I'm I never got to experience that. But it's just really fascinating to hear, because there's so much rave about Spotify and Apple Music, but I'm I don't know if I know one of my friends who intently chooses an album and doesn't hit shuffle even, and just listens to it from the first to the last.
Yeah.
And I'm I do, but probably not often enough.
Yeah. Right?
And it's there's almost a weird handicap, it feels like. There's a big piece of the music experience that came from that, and that's just non-existent with.
Well, and how I wrote
digital.
You the other day about how good the Royal Otis record is.
Yeah.
And you were like, why are you sending this to me? Because the record came out 2 months ago. And I said, well, this is, I think, the first time I sat and listened to it start to finish while I was at work. And then I was struck
it's a different experience.
How many good songs, or just the overall feeling and flow was, and that they didn't all have to be what we call the bangers, which only usually make it on the playlists, right? But just the whole vibe. Yeah, so definitely miss that. Definitely have lost that practice quite a bit myself. And I think the other part to that is, here's the way I was thinking about it afterwards, is that the other big rave about Spotify or Apple Music, or at least streaming and how it's changed stuff for bands and music, is that I'm pretty sure that as an artist right now, you would feel be kind of handcuffed, because it's I have to put my music on Spotify, despite once in a while you see those things about the owner just invested all this money in these guys who make guns in wherever, what I mean, that whole thing happened, and I'm pulling my music from Spotify as a protest, but you'd feel I'm going to be invisible. I'll never, nobody will find my music if I don't go on these things. And so I have no choice, and you feel stuck. But that conversation with him just reminded me that I lived through an era where there was all these bands who were part of underground scenes, and
there's no Spotify or Instagram,
and people couldn't work hard enough to try to find it. That's why I paused him, if you remember, in that middle of that thing where I'm like, can we just stop for a second and recognize that you're telling me a story about how he lived in small town Alberta, right? And every time he went to it, every chance he had, he was in a new record store. He would go looking for this band and couldn't find it for over a year until he found it in Edmonton. Can you imagine wanting to find
an album
record for a year? And then
And like no
finally
way of
this-
listening to it.
and no way to hear it or anything, but still being like, this is the thing I have to have. And then finding it, what that would
Yeah.
feel like would be absolutely incredible.
Like, I'd say the closest thing is that, like, Spotify has, like, pre-saves, right? And so, like, let's say, like, an artist, like, right now, like, I like Olivia Dean, like, I was just listening to, and, like, if she was like, oh, pre-save my album, it comes out in 2 months, then, like, the countdown is on Spotify. Like, you can literally start a countdown.
Yeah.
And it's, like, you get the anticipation aspect from the countdown, but, like,
But here's
you're
the
just
other
waiting for a release date, and then it's all accessible to you just on a tap.
Sure, but here's the other thing that it's souring is that the way the album cycles work, because the next artist that I was just speaking with a little bit ago when I recorded for the next week, we're talking about album cycle things, and like some artists now, or at least their publicists or their labels or whatever, they're releasing 3-4 singles, like starting 6 months out of a full-length release, right? Like, I'm trying to think, who did I just
Well,
start?
artists did that with their album.
Yeah, and remember how much I love Wildorado and that record that came out? Mm-hmm. And they essentially just released 4 songs in a row, and then basically when you went back to Spotify, they looked like they were part of an EP. So I thought all they did was just make an EP. And then I got surprised that they actually made a full record, because and I kind of, as much as I adore that record and band, I don't love that tactic, and I get why they're doing it.
Like
in
the hype and
the digital age. They're trying to sustain hype for a long time, right? And I get that,
but then you listen to it in full, and like only half of it's new to you.
Yeah, and usually the half that's not as good.
Yeah.
Because they're
It's just their bangers to
they're
release.
putting obviously the singles, the hit singles.
Yeah.
So I just don't love that. And then that part of that conversation with Tyson was very reminiscent of a time when the scarcity created so much desire and demand, and
now it's oversaturated.
Yeah, and I get it that there's all kinds of things we miss from that era. Like, I love having such quick and easy and immediate access, the ability to find,
make a playlist,
anybody, like just remember that I had like all these CDs in my closet here. Like, there was a time when my listening only existed with the physical copies I was able to purchase or borrow, and now I don't have that limitation. If I just want to find a song or the song, so there's
well, and it's crazy too, because like I'm a huge like CD purchaser, but the amount of times I've been in like humongous no but the amount of times I've been in like Blackbird Music on White, and I'm like, oh, I love this CD, and I pick it up and I'm like, oh, it's $18, like, sure, and then I'm like humming and hawing, and I'm like, I don't know if I'd want to listen to it start to finish, because like I only really love half the songs. And I'm like, well, at that point I could just go on my Spotify that you pay for, and like play the ones I like or add them to the queue and move on.
Thank you for the acknowledgement.
Yeah, I'm funded fully by you for my music, and that's okay. But I'm like, then I don't buy it, and I'm like, I'm part of the problem.
You want to know what though? I had the same problem when there was no Spotify and it was just CDs, and I would sit there in the store, and I'd maybe have, and it was even worse if there was like 2 that I wanted to get, and I was
like, which
only
one
gonna
do I
buy
like more
one.
percent of?
Yeah, and then I was like, am I going to be disappointed? Or the times I would sit there and I'd be like, the album art looks so good, and it would make me want to buy a record, but then I'm like, I only know one song, and what if the rest of it sucks? And then I'll be so mad because like this is the only $15 I have for another month before I could buy music. So I would have those wrestling matches. It was just a whole different set of issues and problems, right? But,
well, and then when last time I was there was a Briscoe album, which was like, I loved like their set at Folk Fest, not this summer but the past one, and I was like, I like need this album, and then I like was like, I don't need to spend money right now, it's fine. And then I went back for it after work one day and it was gone, and there's no more Briscoe albums, and I was like, I have so many regrets. But I was all like,
they were gonna bring limited numbers in probably here. Yeah,
it's a hard life.
It's a
but
hard life.
I kind of love that I missed that. Like, I kind of loved that I was disappointed about missing out on physical media, because I was like, good, like I should be. Like, that's part of the experience.
I guess it is. It's part of the experience. Well, I mean, that was a fun little, a little detour in that conversation with Tyson, for sure. Definitely brought back a lot of memories. I think I used to tell you, around where Block 1912 is on White.
Yep.
There used to be like a downstairs record store, like this little place called Sonic's with an X at the end. And Uncle B, Brian, used to work there.
Oh, that's
And this
sick.
is when I first came to Edmonton. And he used to work downstairs, and so Saturday mornings I would get up and I would go because that was his shift. He worked Saturdays, and Saturdays were generally him like sorting a whole bunch of new stuff or
So you get to see it
things,
all?
and I would come in and I'd just sit behind the counter with him and I would just flip through CDs like crazy. And
That's so sick.
yeah, it was such a fun experience, I remember, but everything was so locked into being able to access product that way. And even before that, the days when I'd find something from some unique, and then I would have to track down. I think that's where I really got a fascination with the record label kind of stuff that I ended up doing later, that I would have to find out who all the people were. I wanted to find out who the
See
players
those
on the band
connections?
were, and then these guys all play on these same records, and you find out that
Yeah.
they all play on the stuff for this record label, and then I'd find out about the record label, and then I would go and like send them a letter, and they would send me back their catalog, and then I could
Yeah.
order from, like, it's crazy, right? But I would order things sight unseen because I was convinced it would be cool, right?
I like that.
And then the last time that sort of happened in that way to me, which is interesting, actually, is when one of the biggest shifts in the digital transformation took place, which was the early 2000s and Napster and all that pirated music that was available. And the very first thing, but not from Napster, I went to this one called LimeWire, which is like supposed to be like the lesser of the evils, or maybe it was more Mac friendly at the time, or some reason I downloaded LimeWire, which again, all of a sudden you have access to all this music people have uploaded in MP3 format, which was brand new at the time, by the way. And one of the very first things I went looking for was anything to me that was similar. I can't remember how I searched for it. Maybe I was looking for the genre of like this slacker indie rock genre of this band Pavement or Sebadoh, two of my favorites. And it came up with this band called Centromatic that I'd never heard of, and I downloaded it.
Did I just save one of their songs?
And I still love Centromatic
Yeah.
to this day, and it was my first discovery in the MP3 era.
I love that.
So those discoveries are definitely fun. But yeah, cool.
Cool.
Okay, I hope you feel better.
Thanks.
Hope that the tea does its magic.
It's called Mint Magic.
Is it called Mint
Yeah.
Magic? And I just said,
Yeah,
and I had no idea.
and it has a wizard on the box.
It has a wizard on the box. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Channeling the Mint Magic vibes tonight.
I have one other question for you. I just remembered right now.
Better be kind.
Have you already seen Wicked?
No, and you know what? I don't want to.
What?
Hot take. Don't want to.
Well, you know I hate a musical.
Yes.
Hot take for the guy who's in the music podcast business. But I saw
You like
Ariana
Ariana
Grande
Grande.
on a podcast today,
Oh.
and I'm like, I think I need to see, because they're promoting the number 2 right now, which they all shot at the same time.
Yes.
They basically shot 2 movies at once. And
Yes.
then, what a cash cow. But I don't know, I feel like I need to see it. But if you don't want to see it, I'll run it solo.
No, I would see it with you out of love and kindness, and because it's like a social thing, you know, like you gotta see it. But you know what? I'm just so sick of it because I have a time limit on my Instagram every day, and if I'm spending my 15 minutes a day scrolling my reels and a bunch of Wicked SH comes up, I get so sick of it. I don't care for it.
What, you mean like all the press tours? Where
Yes,
her
and it's like
Cynthia
every
Erivo are
makeup
being so
brand,
cute
Wicked this,
together?
Wicked that, every clothing brand, collab this, that. I'm like, all
Come
pink and
on.
green.
You didn't complain when, like, your Disney movies were all over
Yeah,
the
because I was
McDonald's cups and
5.
stuff.
Of course not. I didn't know anything past
Okay.
that.
Okay, I get it. Well, I
But I'll
I just
watch
feel
it,
like I need to see
I'll
it,
enjoy
and yet
it.
I'll probably inevitably at some point start fast forwarding through the songs. And my one cringe thing is she was actually describing today how she did a lot of work so that she could get that sort of style and range back into her voice that's needed for that, so that when she does the seamless transition from talking to singing, that it would be without thinking. And all I could hear was like the seamless transition from talking to singing, which is the thing I hate the most in a musical.
Yeah,
I'm like, quit singing your like your regular thoughts.
Yeah, I'm like, commit to the bit and belt it, or don't sing at all.
Well, she commits to the bit and belts it, but I just hate that transition where I'm like,
it's awkward. It makes you feel
talking,
awkward.
and you could have just kept talking, but now you're gonna sing that stuff, and then you're gonna go back to talking, and everybody's gonna pretend like that didn't happen.
Yeah, right.
That's ridiculous. Like, I think it's as realistic to like pull a lightsaber out of my arse than it is for people to just walk around and break into song and then everyone act like
someone on campus. I kid you not. I came out of a building on campus. I was walking alone, which doesn't happen crazy often on campus, and took my AirPods out. So I was just like,
was that a flex? Like you're a social?
No, listen. This is context, okay?
Oh, okay.
So I was walking, AirPods out, and all of a sudden I hear a distance like singing. And this guy turns the corner of this brick building I was walking toward, and he's in his own musical. He was 2 AirPods in, full belt, out loud, but bringing people into it, like walking up to people and like stroking their arm and like singing at them.
Theater kid.
No, like past that.
Vic Comp.
It was
a major from Vic Comp.
I was like, what? And then he tells you he's like majoring in biology, but like no.
What?
No, I'm just like that's just the type.
Oh.
But anyways, I was just like, but no one around acted like it was just normal. That's why my musicals are fake. Everyone around, you make eye contact with someone, their face is like WTF.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's got the big eyes and they're like, somebody else please tell me I'm not
giggling,
crazy.
laughing.
Yeah, 100%.
I wasn't keeping a straight face.
I would be like highly intolerant now. I'd be a grumpy old man on that one, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, one last thing. This is a really long one that we thought we'd keep short.
I know.
Oh no, I'm going to save this for next one. If I remember, I'll go upstairs, write it down. I'm going to pin this last thought.
What if it doesn't flow with next
It's going to be so great. Okay, thank you. Hope you feel better.
Thanks.
Okay, love you.
Bye.
Bye.